Hello, this is Luke from Ryonet. Wanted to go ahead and get this guy started, say hello, and we'll see. We're going to give it just a quick minute here. We got a bunch of people checking in. Just going to kind of go through here real fast, see who all we have in here. All right, we got a lot. And then just waiting on like one or two more people, and then we'll go ahead and get started. So a quick rundown of what we're going to do today. So this is really going to be a conversation talking about what are the 6 major questions to ask when you're purchasing a DTG. You can use these questions for looking at any direct-to-garment printer. These are ones that I've used over the years. These are things that I highly recommend people focus on whenever they are looking into this. Let me just change my camera here real fast. And as we go through these, please feel free to ask any questions that you have on this stuff. And also you can put in questions on the chat area on GoToMeeting. I've got Sebastian at Ryonet headquarters with me here. And then we also will have Mike from Snarky Cancer coming in soon as well. That way we can kind of go through a couple different things with their experience. Let me check on Mike really quick, see where he's at. And he is running a shop, so he might be super busy right now. Let's see. Text him, Mike. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and get started, and then Mike will come in here pretty soon. Again, feel free to ask all the questions. Throw them down there in the chat as we go through some of this stuff. After this too, we're gonna send out a quick run through of the questions that we went over and just a review on everything. So definitely take notes, but know that we're going to have some specific stuff coming to you as well, so you can review this. And also you get a copy of this recording or a link to view it as well. So feel free to review that later as well. I said as well like 5 times. So let's get started. So buying a DTG, what are the main 6 questions that I go through when buying DTG? That's what we're going to talk about today. And one of the first questions that I always get into really comes around the ink cost, okay? And we're gonna talk about a lot of different things. These are in no particular order, but a big question that I tell people to really look into is what are the ink costs? You need to know, for instance, is there a bulk ink option? Is there a sealed cartridge option? And what are the different costs associated with that? It's very important because certain print shop or certain printer manufacturers have a really high costing ink, but they also provide a really high yield. So you would need to know what the cost of the ink is specifically, like how many milliliter or how much it costs per milliliter. But then also you need to know kind of what the average cost for a shirt is. So a good question to ask is a 2-part question. One, how much does the ink cost when I buy it in a cartridge? How much does the ink cost when it's per milliliter, if I'm buying it in bulk or per liter? And then the second part of the question is, how much is the average shirt size that I print in my shop, which let's say that it's 9 by 12, 11 by 11, 12 by 12, whatever it may be, how much does that average shirt size cost? The cool thing with today on printers is the RIPs, almost all of them can give you a cost estimator. Actually, it's not an estimator, it's very specific. It'll be super close, if not dead on, what that will cost. I do that quite often with the RIP that we have with the PolyPrints, and that's one of the nice things about it is that it does a very detailed cost analysis on this. So, and I tell people to ask about the specific size that they print, because while most of the time across the board, I actually see a lot of people averaging 10 to 11 inches wide. Some shops average 12, 13 plus, okay? That's also a question to ask as a side note, because if the printer you're looking at cannot print your average width, then or your average length, that could be a problem. And so we want to look at a different printer in that case. If you print 16 inches wide all the time, but the printer can only do 14, then let's move on to the next printer. So that's just kind of a little bonus question there. The other question that you can ask is, how much does it cost per head cleaning? This is a really big one, especially in machines that have auto cleaning or startup cleanings, because that can add up super quick. On average with any direct-to-garment printer, you're at least going to do a head cleaning per day. A head cleaning, by the way, is we're just pulling some ink through the nozzles to kind of make sure that there's no clogs or anything like that. A head cleaning is also used if there are clogs. It kind of forces those clogs out through the nozzle, so you're good to go. Now, if a head cleaning costs $1, for instance, and you have to do one is automated when it turns on the machine, one's automated when the machine goes off, and then you have to do one when you're in the middle of printing. That's $3 a day. It's $60 a month. So those are the types of questions you want to ask. Now, head cleanings are super, super needed, and they're very, very beneficial, but you need to know what your costs are. It's very specific on there. And the kind of last part to circle back is this printer a refillable system or a bag system, or can I only have cartridges? Now, here's a huge caveat to that. This is my big thing that I talk about when we look at bulk ink in general for direct current printers. If you're an existing shop that uses a DTG already and you're working on it for a couple hours a day, you're going to want to get into bulk ink. Bulk ink is super great, or a refillable cartridge system is phenomenal, because just like anything, it's the Costco method. The more you buy, the better the price. All right. Now, the problem with bulk inks right out of the gate, when it's your very first printer or very first kind of step into digital for your businesses, you don't necessarily know a lot about the machine. You don't know how to use it a ton. You might not even know exactly how it's going to fit. You have an idea of how it's going to fit in your business, but those first like 3 months, when you're really ramping up and learning things and dialing in your process and stuff, you are also running your business and making sales through everywhere else that you've been making sales that did not use digital. So that's important, because you might go a couple of days without using your printer. And in general, bulk ink is not great for that. That's why, like with the PolyPrints, we have a cartridge-based system, and then we also have a refillable ink system for bulk ink. So people buy ink by the liter at that point. All of them will come with a standard 2 sets of pre-sealed cartridges, all right? And I tell people to stick with those sealed cartridges until you get comfortable with the machine and you're printing on it every day for a couple hours a day. Because when you have a bulk ink system, it gives opportunity for air to kind of get into the lines, into the system more than if you have a sealed cartridge. And that's just because of the design of a lot of these bulk ink systems. It's just the nature of that. But again, typically these are meant for shops that are running these guys multiple hours a day, every day, very consistently. So that problem does not occur when you're running them like that. But if you're new, you're probably not going to be running them that much right out of the gate. So that's going to be the first question that we kind of go over, is what are the total ink costs? All right, so to summarize, ink costs, you care about a couple things. One, how do I buy the ink from you? Is with this printer, is it going to be cartridges? Is it a refillable option? What are the prices associated with that? 2, what is the price per milliliter? And 3, what's the average cost per print, or the average milliliters used on a print for the size that you print in your shop, okay? Because everyone will have their general sizes. They're all different, and every shop is different too. So that's why I always ask that. Now, if you have more questions about this that I haven't gone over, please throw them into the chat. Sebastian's going to get you taken care of. And again, too, at the end, we'll kind of have an open Q&A. Next question, what are the maintenance procedures? All right, the maintenance procedures. This is such a hot topic, and unfortunately, it definitely depends on the printer. It depends on the user and stuff like that. When you look on the forums, it's really tough to judge, how this person has used the printer and things like that. So I say that because you really want to talk to people who are already using the machine that you're looking at. And people that are, at least successfully using it. If someone gets a machine and then lets it sit for weeks at a time, no matter what machine we're talking about, they're going to not have a great experience. And if that person is the one that's going all over the forums saying that maintenance stinks, you need to look at that experience that they had. So that's just kind of a quick caveat. But as far as the maintenance procedures specifically you want to look at, it's a couple of things. Number one, look at what is the daily startup routine. This is such a big important aspect, because when you start a DTG for the day, depending on which one you're looking at, there's going to be automatic startup things that it does. Like some of them will do an auto head cleaning and things like that. And then there's going to be the recommended. Now, as a whole, across the board, just keeping the slate clean, what I always recommend on these desktop style units, which are going to be like the PolyPrint, the Epson, the Brothers, all of them, the OmniPrints, all those guys, is when you start up for the day, I want you to agitate your ink. So that's going to be shaking the ink, shaking the bulk cartridges, pouches, whatever. And then I want you to do a nozzle check. All right, because nozzle check, it's going to print a small amount of ink out of each nozzle. And then you can look at that to tell you if we're missing a bunch of nozzles, we've got some clogs and we need to do a head cleaning. That will be your indicator right there if you need to do a head cleaning during your start routine. Most of the time you will. All right, that's why a lot of these do them automated. However, some shops, if they're using it a lot, they don't need to do that. They just turned off the machine, 2 shifts ago or whatever it may be. So they're starting it for the first time today, and they don't necessarily need to do that here. So your startup routine is a very, very big thing. Your daily maintenance, meaning throughout the day, am I going to need to do head cleanings? Are there automated head cleanings? Like if it sits idle for a certain amount of time, is it going to maintain itself? What is going to happen? And then at the end of the day, what should I do to shut it down? This is something that's very interesting, and because there's certain machines that do automatic head cleanings or auto maintenance when the machine is idle for a certain amount of time. That's great when you have control over it. All right. With these machines, for instance, we have control over that. And what's really cool is depending on the environment and the type of shop that I'm working with, I can recommend, hey, you know what, there's a function where we can tell it to do head cleaning once an hour. And you're in the middle of the desert where it's super dry. So we're going to turn that guy on. Maybe we'll even do it once every 30 minutes. It doesn't matter what DTG we put in your shop, you're going to have something like that on. However, you're in a really high humidity area, you might not need that. Most people don't. So that's a really cool thing to think about. But what do you need to do at the end of the day to kind of clean things up and make sure we're good for the next morning? Some people will get into a really good habit of actually wiping around the print head, cleaning the wiper blade and the capping station, and then shutting it down at the end of the day. That process, by the way, should only be like 1 minute to 2 minutes tops, okay? And you're not wasting a bunch of ink or anything when you do something like that. You're literally just using the cleaning solution that these printers include for them. That kind of sets you up for the next day. And the whole goal you have to understand when you get into digital printing is it's all a game. The name of the game is to keep your print head lasting and printing. And the number one thing that actually will help that outside of just using the machine regularly is going to be keeping the capping station and the wiper blade clean, because those pieces are the wiper blade scrapes across the bottom of that print head to keep it clean. The capping station seals around it when it's not being used, so that way we have a good seal and we're not letting a bunch of air get into it. So we talked about our daily start routine, our daily maintenance / end of the day. The other thing to ask about is there a specific weekly maintenance? One good weekly maintenance that I recommend across the board, no matter what machine you have, is clean your machine. In the fact of dust it, wipe it down. Behind all the print heads in these machines, there's a clear strip. It's called an encoder strip. Some people call it a QR strip. All kinds of different names for it, but it's basically a clear or translucent looking strip of film, really. And that strip should be wiped down just once a week. The reason why is because that guy is basically a measuring tape, and the print head reads where it's at on that measuring tape, and depending on that info, the computer in these printers will tell it to drop ink. So when someone doesn't dust their machine every week or at least every 2 weeks, every once in a while they'll start getting these random errors that can happen. And one of the first things, no matter what machine I'm looking at, I tell people to look at is when was the last time you wiped down your encoder strip? And most of the time they'll say, what's an encoder strip? So that's a very important thing that I recommend. Weekly maintenance, do that. Some machines require you to do tube flushings, additional head cleanings, putting special drops in the capping station, just to make sure that the machine is good over the weekend and stuff. But just ask those questions that you really need to know. So again, when we talk about maintenance, which is a very, very, very big thing, we've talked about what's the startup routine, what's my daily maintenance, kind of like end of day maintenance too, what's my weekly maintenance, and then finally ask, is there a quarterly, a monthly, a yearly maintenance type of thing? Depending on the printer, again, you might have to flush the tubes out every so often. If you're using refillable cartridges, Most manufacturers recommend that you replace them every 6 to 12 months. You get new refillable cartridges, for instance. So just ask those questions if there's anything different. With the PolyPrints, there's nothing different, which is cool. And so it's very easy for me to put together a maintenance plan for someone. And then I basically say, hey, when you start up, you do this. When you shut down, you do that. Once a week, you do this. Hey, if you're using refillable cartridges, replace them every 6 to 9 months, I actually recommend. And that's it. It's great. Works out really good. So, but again, it's very, very specific. So ask what are the maintenance procedures and stick with those couple of things. Startup routine, daily maintenance, weekly maintenance, anything else that I need to look for. Like, is there a maintenance part that I have to replace with the Epsons? There's a maintenance kit that you actually have to replace every so many prints. It's $100, so you can kind of put that into your budget. Those are the key questions about maintenance that you need to have. All right, we're gonna move on to the next question. We're banging these out like super quick. This is actually great because we're gonna have a lot of time for Q&A. Again, though, ask questions in the chat, and Sebastian and myself will definitely help out with that. We're gonna also just double check here. Yep, so we're gonna keep going, okay. All right, so here's another one. How much does a replacement print head cost? So this is a big one that people sometimes forget about. And sometimes people don't mention, like people meaning the manufacturers or the people selling these machines don't mention this. Let me be very, very clear. These machines are just like a car, all right? Think about brake pads. Your brake pads get used every day. They eventually will wear out. You got to buy new brake pads, right? The print head is like brake pad. It's eventually going to wear out. And no matter what any manufacturer says, they will eventually wear out. Now, how often that's going to happen, how many prints and things like that, that'll depend on the manufacturer. That'll also depend on you, the shop. How much are you using it? How well are you maintaining the machine? But eventually they will wear out, and the mass majority of the time it's going to be after the warranty is up, right? So after the warranty is up. Oh, looks like we got Mike. Hey, Mike.
So sorry. Hey, how you doing, Luke?
I'm doing great, man, but you're super late. You know that?
I am super late. It's this,
Hey, Mike,
it's this time change.
Yeah, really. Oh my gosh, this thing's been nuts this week. So do me a favor, Mike. We're already in question 3 here, so we're going to keep going through these. But real quick, do me a favor. Will you kind of give a quick scenario, a quick feedback on, who you are, who your shop is, and
Sure.
where you're at with DTG.
Sure.
And then as we go through these things, please, jump in and ask questions. And if not, just mute yourself and you'll be good.
Okay. My wife and I run a shop in Washington State called Snarky Cancer. This is driven by my wife and Trey's multiple cancers. To make a long story short, we started an appropriate t-shirt line and do fundraisers for families going through this, since that community gave back so much to us. Here at Snarky, it's more than just about t-shirts. So that's what our shop. So what we have done is we have a retail arm of Snarky that multiple designs, multiple full color designs. And our shop, we've only been doing this for about 2-3 years. So to take these, fulfill our retail side of our brand, we wanted to look into a DTG machine, because we are just basic printers, really, starting out. And to take some of these designs and to then have them on our press when we should be printing fundraisers or other stuff, it just seemed like a huge problem. So that's when we started looking at direct to garment. What it has done for our shop is amazing. I come in, and because of Snarky gaining some great traction, there's a lot of fulfillment that I do for our brand. And I don't think that we could do it here on, we've got 2 manual presses. I don't think I could be successful and effective trying to get all that retail on that press in a day with what we got going on. So I come in and I have used this direct to garment machine to, oh, excuse me, all right. I've used this direct to garment machine for that fulfillment. And then obviously any businesses that come in that want direct to garment services. But what we found is that the need was there before jumping into this, before really then starting to ask questions. Is this going to be a right fit for us? You know, the whole process, the whole printing process, direct garment is so much different than screen printing. So that was the direction we went a year ago, and it was the best business decision that we could have made. Obviously, yeah, absolutely.
Nice. And Mike, you're cutting out a little bit, so I'm gonna kind of jump back in. Feel free though, share your webcam whenever you want. A quick rundown. The reason why I wanted Mike to be involved here is him and I spent a lot of time really going through all these questions that we're discussing before they made the decision, and then after the fact, we spent a lot of time, like just dialing in things and making sure that they're very comfortable with stuff. Mike is with Snarky Cancer, has done some phenomenal, really cool stuff with his digital machines, and he's got a really good grasp on the use of them and stuff. So Mike, let us know as we're going through this, any tips that you have when we're talking about these different questions,
Sure.
any things that you specifically were looking for based on your experience and what you need. And then also too, for everyone, we are going to do a Q&A kind of at the end, and that's where I think we'll ping pong a lot of stuff off of Mike too. So I just want to introduce him real quick. These guys are great. Look them up, Snarky Cancer. We're going to keep on going here with this question 3, talking about a print head replacement cost. So like I was saying before, these machines are like cars. All of them are. Car parts wear out eventually. Brake pads wear out. This is a great example. Your print head is like a brake pad. What is it going to cost? What does it cost me to replace a print head after warranty? And if it wears out under warranty, what is that process? Those are that's a 2-part question you need to ask, and make sure, be very specific about that, because you will replace a print head. I will tell you too, they're honestly, for a lot of these machines, not hard to replace. More than anything, there's just a lot of screws you got to get undone before you get to it. It's pretty easy to replace them if the machine allows it. So that's a good question, because some manufacturers, they want them to do the installation of a print head or any of these major parts for it to be under warranty if it gets replaced. So again, just finalize that cost. For instance, if you have to pay this company to come in and install it, well, how much is that going to cost? If the print head is $2,000 and then it's going to cost me $1,500 to get someone in, then okay, that's $3,500 I have to be okay with spending after the year warranty that's on this print head, because I will eventually have to do that. Now, like with these, it's $900. We ship it to you. I can next day air it, no problem. And I have videos, or I can walk you through installing it. It works great, but that's a big thing. You eventually will have to replace one, and it most likely will happen after the first year. Almost all of them, if it happens within the first year, outside of very specific circumstances, it's going to be covered under the warranty. So that's also where it's important to ask, like, what's that process? And a quick side note about print heads. Something that you have to also understand is most of the time print heads do not just randomly stop working. All right. When I get a call about any machine and they say that the print head just stopped working, the first question I ask is, when was the last time you used the machine, and what'd you do in between then and now? Because usually someone has let it sit for a long time, or they haven't maintained it, they haven't cleaned it, things like that nature. And then it kind of leads to that. Now, if they've been using the machine for a good long time and a standard time, what'll happen is eventually that printhead will just kind of start to wear out. Your nozzle checks, is why it's important to do these daily, will start to not look as great as they typically are. When that happens and I get a call, I say, hey, send me a nozzle check, and I can tell you, hey, this printhead is starting to go down. You can still use it, most likely, depending, almost all the time you can still get by with it, but start preparing, and we might even want to go ahead and get a printhead on its way to you, so that when we do decide to make the change, we can do that. So again, just kind of summarize that, you will have to replace a printhead with any DTG eventually. They're like parts on a car. Think about brake pads. How much does it cost after the warranty? Do I have to pay someone to come and replace it for me? And then what is the procedure when it's under warranty? All right.
Can I add
Now
something into that,
yeah,
Luke?
go for it, man. Yeah, go for it.
Another thing probably responsibly to think of is if you're replacing your print head, if you have the time, or, obviously, it's also a great opportunity if you get dampeners, if you want to replace any of the other parts, tube, that, ink, so there's also, if you probably have gone a long time on a machine, it's responsible also maybe to look at a few of those other parts while you're in there. I mean, as you know, the head cost versus some tubes or dampener costs, the relative,
Right.
While you're in there,
Yeah, Mike brings up a good point, and I feel like we're on a very similar wavelength here, because my little tip is to also ask, like, what other pieces do you recommend to replace when you replace a print head? And so, that's like Mike was just pointing out, those are things like your ink system, so like the tubes that take the ink from the cartridge to the print head. If there's a special capping station, dampers, all those things. The cool thing is, depending on the manufacturer, those parts are usually not super expensive. The print head is almost always going to be the most expensive part in that printer. But it's good to know, it's like, hey, worst case scenario, or, what do you recommend? Like when someone replaces a print head with a PolyPrint, and it's been used for a good long time, and it's just kind of worn out at that point, I personally do recommend that, hey, let's go ahead and replace the ink system and get a new capping station and wiper blade combo put in there. So that's an extra couple $100. It's super not expensive. Those parts just eventually will wear out. So it's a great point to do, and ask those questions. Like, that's the big thing, is really, in today's age, to be honest, there are some phenomenal machines out there that are in this like desktop model aspect, that's between 15 and 25 grand. And I really am super excited about that. But also, when you're looking at a machine, you just need to know those specific costs, because you will have to do that, and that's just part of it. So that's really what can separate those differences, is just knowing those things. So again, to recap that question, we're asking, how much does it cost to replace a print head? What's the process of doing that? Can I do it myself? Do I have to have someone installed? If so, what's the cost of getting someone out here? Process after warranty versus before the warranty. And then, are there any other recommended parts that we might want to replace when we go to do that? So let's go ahead and move on to the next thing, which we kind of started to talk about a little bit, but what is the warranty on this machine? And again, I want you to look for specifics, okay? With the PolyPrint, for instance, the warranty is, we have a 1-year warranty on the print head. We have 3 years on all computer components. And then there are parts that are touched by ink. So those are like tubes, dampeners, capping station, things like that, that are not covered by warranty, because they just wear out over time, and they're very small expense to replace those when they do eventually wear out. So that's a very important thing to ask. And then kind of a side question is, can I add an extended warranty onto this printer? What does that cost? What does it cover? Because again, typically, these warranties, they're usually, saying they're a bumper to bumper, but there's a little bit more specifics in that. Like what, for instance, if a printer goes out during the first year, what will make it not be under warranty? Like with these machines, if a print head goes out for some reason, they're tested for over 4 hours in the facility before they even leave the manufacturing plant. And most of that is all about the print head. But if it does go out within the first year, the warranty covers it. The only reason why it wouldn't cover it is we can actually pull data from the printer, and this is on almost all printers, you can do this, and see, oh, well, they've let it sit for 6 months with ink in it, or, oh, they've, it's been in a very bad environment for X amount of time. They haven't done very much maintenance on this. And really, it's just a discussion to have. At the end of the day, whoever you purchase your machine from, you always want to hope that they're going to do the right thing. And then at the same time, too, as the business owner, you have ownership of that process and stuff too. So, but those are the specifics we want to ask is, what is the warranty? What parts specifically are covered over it, and what will deem a part not being under warranty if it goes out within that period, because there are some of those caveats with most of these manufacturers, including PolyPrint, just because that's part of it, you know. And kind of really, that's a very cut and dry, straightforward question. But the biggest thing that I hear is people will ask, what's the warranty of this machine? And they'll say, oh, it's this. And, you know, it's 1 year on the print head. Have a great day. You know, it's like, well, what's the specifics about that? You know, let's talk a little bit more. So that's kind of my major feedback there is, you know, ask what is the warranty? How do I use the warranty? You know, and why would something not be covered under the warranty? So that's my feedback on that question, is to, like most of these, let's dive a little deeper.
Right. Right.
All right, so next question. This is probably the most passed over question that I get when talking to people. I mention it a lot because it's very important. I also mention it a lot because a lot of people forget to ask this question. What RIP is included with the printer, and is there a premium option? Now, this is so important because, you know, we have this machine, right? But the RIP is what tells the machine what to print and how to do it, things like that. So it's important for the factor of, I have just a standard RIP that I just need to, hey, I'm doing simple stuff, blow and go, I need it to look right and print good, then that's great. That's a standard RIP. If you have more advanced needs, like you want to create customized templates, you want custom cues, maybe you need barcoding, things like that nature, you know, that's why I always put this question as, well, what RIP is included, and is there a premium option? You know, for instance, a RIP that I use a lot is the CADLink's Digital Factory. It's a very premium RIP. It has a load of features, which is really cool. We include it as a standard with this printer. That RIP also has brother versions, Epson's, and a bunch of other different ones too. There's other ones out there as well, like Katari, and like Dev Studio, a couple others too. So just ask those questions about that. You know, and again, the reason why this is commonly jumped over is because everyone's looking about the machine, and the machine is absolutely, obviously, a huge key factor. But what is telling the machine what to do, which is the RIP, is a very, very important thing. Today, for instance, in this day and age, I work with a lot of people who do like Shopify fulfillment. They need faster processing options, they need barcode options and things like that. So it's very important to have that conversation. Hey, this is what this RIP does out of the box. What you're telling me are things that maybe it doesn't do, or what you're telling me are things that it absolutely takes care of. Like, that's how I approach that question. And it's super important. Even if you don't need some of those features, but you're thinking you're going to ramp up into it, it's good to know, because let's say that your Garment Creator is a great RIP. It's very easy to use. It's very straightforward. You can print good stuff with it. But let's say that you're going to want more control. You're eventually going to want to get into barcoding. So what is it going to cost for me to buy this RIP in a year or so? Put that in the budget, right? Because if this RIP is $1,000, but I've got a year to save up for it, that's not really too much to put aside over a year. And you just need to have that option. Or maybe this RIP is already included with the printer itself. So, Mike, do you have any feedback on your experience with RIPs or anything like that? Because I know, again, it's a big thing that not a lot of people talk about.
It is, and that's something that wasn't even in my wheelhouse really when we were first looking at DTG machines. Of course, excuse me. Of course, kind of general understanding what the RIP does. But now that I've been printing for a while, I do see a lot of those needs, especially like because we do some fulfillment off of Shopify, those barcodes, to be able to where it helped your business side versus, hey, rip a nice t-shirt, So I've noticed, I also have obviously the CADLink. I love this RIP. It's an intuitive RIP. I do see things or wish there were other features that probably that's exactly what you're discussing, is more of a premium rip. These are things that I've just started really seeing now with my printing, and the benefits of a great rip. I am glad that going with the PolyPrint, that this rip came with it. I mean, it has made my life. I love it, but something I didn't think about when I first was looking.
Yeah, it's interesting because
It's so important.
yeah, it's such an important factor, and again, it gets missed a lot. There's really specific things that a more premium rip like CADLink can do for you. For instance, like I said, the maintenance factor. With that rip, what's neat is we can choose when we want the auto head cleaning to happen, if we want the auto head cleaning to happen, things like that. So it's super cool
And thanks for that
that we
tip.
have those options. Yeah, it can be very helpful, especially
Yeah.
for everyone to know when you get into DTG and you're going through like season changes. Sometimes random things can happen, like if you're used to it being, just mild climate, but then it gets super hot. It can affect certain things with ink, and again, this is across the board. It's very easy to deal with and stuff, but that's where like having these options of, I can use this feature if and when I need it and things like that. That's very, very helpful. So,
Yes.
all right, so we're gonna move on to the next one, which is kind of our final one here. Man, we've shot through these super quick. It's great.
Well, I wasn't here for half of them.
I know, yeah. When Mike wasn't here, we were going very efficiently. All right, so last question that I like to kind of end on is what type of training and support do you provide? And again, this is me if I'm looking into a DTG. What type of training are you, the seller or the manufacturer, going to provide me? And not just necessarily like when I receive the printer, how do I set it up and stuff, but when I have a problem, what do I do? Because here's what you have to understand is, for most people, this is a brand new decorating method. A lot of people that we deal with at Ryonet are existing screen printers, so they know apparel, and they typically know art pretty well. But this is a little bit different of art, and it's a little different process. Like for instance, we haven't even talked about like pre-treat, and things like that. And it's very important to know what you're going to get. I'll be honest too, what's cool with these style of machines, the vast majority of the time, you don't need an in-house, in-person installation and training because they come really well set up. And like, for instance, when we put one of these machines in the field, we do a video call to do the setup. We do additional video calls for training, and then we're there, on demand when you need us. It's very important because that first, like 6 to 9 weeks or so is like your ramp up learning curve with this new machine, whatever DTG we're talking about. And so you want to have a good backbone option for that. So again, asking what initial training is going to look like what's the install look like? Are you going to be here? If not, can I pay for that? Because some people just like that. It's okay. What is the ongoing support look like? There's some companies that, have a pretty strict support aspect where, okay, you can call us during these times of days. If you want more time, you can pay X amount, whatever it is. That's becoming more and more of a thing. Every day, it seems, I hear more of that. So it's very important to ask that question. And then finally, something that isn't talked about a lot about, but is associated with this is, what happens when there are updates on the printer? Or what happens when there's updates with my software? Do I get those updates? Like we do firmware updates on these pretty often. And what's nice is depending on the specific model, you may need to do it, you may not, but we can, virtually do the update for you. Same thing with the RIP. Depending on the RIP, usually it will actually search for an update and just automatically update for you. So asking kind of those questions, what can happen. And then another part of this is, when we talk about training and support being the big word, is, well, cool. So when a part wears out, if it's not under warranty or if it is under warranty, like what kind of support do I get? What can I expect when something happens? Because, unfortunately, just like with anything that we get into as garment decorators, if we get a screen printing press, an exposure unit, a DTG, a dryer, something eventually is going to wear out or happen. And most of the time, your Uncle Murphy is in the room and it's in like the worst possible scenario, okay? So you need to know that you have a backbone support for that and what the process is when taking care of that. So yeah, Mike, do you have any questions or feedback on this part? And then kind of we'll wrap up this, and as Mike is kind of giving his initial feedback on like training and support and what he would kind of give as tips, please start asking questions in the chat, and we'll start kind of going through those and answering them. Sebastian, start kind of loading those up, and we'll start firing them off as we go.
Hold on, I'm sorry. I think I got muted. Am I muted?
Sorry, you're good now.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're great.
Okay.
You're good.
I was lucky enough to have a startup done by the great Luke Ryerkirk from Ryonet. I think those videos that you discussed, those that sounds great, because with those, as far as understanding those basic principles, whether somebody's there with you or through that, it's just a learning curve. Just have somebody there to bounce stuff off of. Is just, you know, I think one of the most imperative things. You know, let's see. That's pretty much kind of all I have on that. It's really overwhelming. It can be a little overwhelming at first because you're trying to absorb so much, but there's just those few basic things to get you going that just, you know, and then you see it, and yeah.
Yeah,
a
you
lot
know,
of
Mike,
guys, a lot of guys will just get a machine at their door, and that's it, you know.
yeah, Mike puts out actually a good point that I'd like to point out too, which is when you start using any digital machine and it's your first one, really, you know, rely on the person that you purchase it from to give you some major feedback. As like what I tell people to do is, okay, hey, let's go ahead and we're going to get the machine set up. I'm going to show you a couple of things. I'm going to send you a couple of videos, and I want you to kind of stick to that for like the next week to 2 weeks. Just like stick to the simple stuff. You know, that way you're learning, you're figuring things out. You know, shoot me an email, call or text, whatever, and you know we can quickly help you out on those specific aspects. But you know, really try to simplify it. A big tip too that I give a lot of people recommendations on is garment selection. So with screen printing, obviously, you know, the better quality garment, the better your print's going to be, right? With digital, it's even more important. And so when I work with shops that are, you know, a screen printing shop that is bringing in digital to do their low runs or one-offs and things like that nature, big help that I recommend them do is say, hey, choose 1 or 3 garments that you're going to offer the service on for like the first couple weeks, couple months, even if you want, just so that you're super comfortable with it. All right, because a problem when I'm working with shops that I hear or I receive a lot is, you know, day 1 they're printing on this shirt, day 2 they're printing on a tri-blend, day 3 they're printing on a 50-50, day 4 they're trying to do 100% polyester, and so like they're changing these variants every day or throughout the day even, and it creates, you know, a tough spot. Because
first,
you are learning.
you're so looking for consistency. You're so looking for those consistent prints, jumping back and forth to other garments. I mean, I'm still getting this into Trish sometimes, some of the stuff she tries to hand me to DTG on, but that is so important. You know, that tighter weave, tri-blend, or, you know, those, garment is huge, especially when you're first learning, you know, so that you can see that I base my everything what's going on in my print. I know because I have a rock solid pre-treat. I mean, rock solid. So and with the garments that I'm, used to printing on. So yeah, garment is huge. You bet. You will
Yeah,
see.
it's such a big thing.
Some of that, yeah.
Yeah, and definitely again too, please be asking any questions you guys have. I've been telling everyone to put in the chat spot, put it in the questions area.
I keep looking down to see if I'm missing
Yeah, so put it in the questions area. A question that comes up to me all the time is what garments do you recommend? And I have a couple of them that I'll give out real quick. One that I really like, that I've recently liked for 100% ring spun cotton, has been the District DT 104. We started printing on those at the Long Beach show, and since then they've become my standard for samples and stuff. It's a really great garment, and it's not super expensive. Of course, the Bella 3001s are great. Basically, just for 100% cotton, you're looking for ring spun cotton, and specifically, like carded ring spun cotton. So those are going to be those styles. Even actually, Gild and Soft Style has recently gotten really good at some stuff.
Yeah.
So
I just printed a 30 shirt run on those districts on Sunday, and loved them. Absolutely loved them.
Actually, I've been super impressed with them.
Tri-blend, though, is what I was printing on.
Oh, is a tri-blend version of that?
Yeah. Is that, or did you have 100% cotton at the show?
So we were at the show, we were doing 100% cotton, okay. And then we also had some all-mates that we were doing for tri-blends. Okay. When you get into tri-blends, it's all about the pre-treat process. So you're going to tweak that a little bit. But one of the reasons why that all-mate actually works really well for DTG is because how they process the polyester in there. And so depending on what tri-blend or 50/50 you're looking at, there can be some variances there. And as a quick disclaimer that I'd like to put out there, since we're talking about apparel and garment selection, a big question that I get asked a lot, which I haven't mentioned in here because I don't recommend you even worry about this, is can this printer print on 100% polyester? To answer that question super quick, because it's a very specific question that gets asked all the time. Most DTGs today can print on 100% dark polyester with special pre-treat. However, this is the big but, the big however, it doesn't come out fully retail ready. Some I've tested all of them, and some I've seen look really great, but then I start seeing bleeding within a day or two. Other ones, you still see that pre-treat box even more so. So right now, I'll tell you, and if anyone is using a printer and consistently printing on different types of 100% polyester and they're really happy about it, please shoot me a message, because I personally have not found one that I've been super pumped about yet. So the answer I always tell people is, can you do it? Sure can. Do we sell it on our website? No, because we don't recommend it at the moment and haven't really found something that is 100% retail ready. In my opinion there. So
which brings me to one point also that I'd like to bring up. I wish that when we'd first gotten this machine, I think that a pre-treat machine should be a no-brainer. Absolutely budget that into your purchase price. That will pretty much set you up for success as far as in your pre-treat process.
Yeah, because you guys started as manual, right?
And I had the magic wrist. I was pre-treating, and I tell you what, I can't believe what it did moving to our pearl. Amazing.
So that is a really and that's a really good question too, or a good question to ask. That comes up quite often is, what do I do about pre-treat? What pre-treat machines are recommended? I have a whole webinar about pre-treatment, so feel free, we can send you a link to that. I'm not sure if it's online on YouTube yet, but just reach out on social. We'll get you the link if we don't have it up yet. But one of the things that we talk about a lot when we talk about setting up a business is with pre-treat. Now, I didn't put it in today's kind of webinar because we're talking specifically about a DTG, but let me tell you, that is such an important aspect, like Mike was just mentioning. What I tell people is, if it's not in the budget when you go to purchase your machine, I recommend putting a budget together to buy within the first 3 months, because you can manually pre-treat. Just like what Mike said, he has the magic hand. He was using a Wagner spray gun, and also you did the roll-on method too, right?
I tried. I did it all, Luke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the thing is that you can get good at it, but it's very hard to be super consistent. And
There's no
if
way
your
to be
shop,
super consistent with that.
yeah, yeah, it's really, really tough. And if you're a shop that has employees and you want to train those employees on doing things like that, you really need to get a machine simply because what a pre-treat machine does for you is it makes everything consistent. It makes it repeatable. It also makes it trainable, which is really important for shops that have employees. So I highly recommend it. And it's funny, I used to say, in 2019, there's only I think there's only two people that purchased a DTG from Ryonet and didn't purchase a pre-treat machine either at the purchase or within 3 months. And Mike was one of them for a long time. Was one of the two people. And yeah, so that's a good feedback. Definitely recommend it. If you're doing this and printing for other people, definitely. If it can't be initially, that's okay. But put a budget together for it for sure. So
I learned my lesson.
yeah, it's a cool. I mean, it's definitely a learning curve, and again, it has its place. That's another thing is making sure that you're putting DTG in the right spot in your business, and that's something that I talk about again a lot. Is why are you looking to put a DTG in your shop? What are you wanting to accomplish it? Because I'll be the first to tell you if that's not a good idea. The key thing that I want people to really focus on when they start looking at direct current printing initially is it a fit for my business? And then we jump into these 6 questions specific about a machine, right? So is it a fit for my business? And if it's not, myself or anyone on the Ryonet staff will absolutely tell you that it's not and recommend something else for sure. Sebastian, do you have any feedback or questions that you've had come through that we might not have talked about or anything?
We do have a couple questions here. What are your
Shoot
thoughts
away.
on the multi-shirt machines? Or is it better to go with a couple PolyPrint machines? We sell a lot of shirts through Shopify and use POD sites for our printing.
Nice. That's a great question. So right now, I really recommend going the multi-unit route. Simply because if you get a machine that has multiple pallets on it at the moment, um, most of them do not have a way, are not built in the fact where if part of the print head goes down, the rest of it can still work or something. So what ends up happening is when that machine goes down, you're down is the problem. So when you have multiple machines, like, well, we're seeing a lot of people, they'll get one machine and then they'll turn around in a couple months or a year later and buy 3 or 4 more, and they'll put together like a hive where you have 4 machines around a dryer, for instance.
Yeah.
The great thing about that is when one machine needs to be maintained, or maybe you need to replace a part on a machine. Let's say you have 4 machines, you still are running 3 of those machines, right? There's a guy that I work with that has 5 machines, and he has 5 DTG printers. And basically, he sets up a maintenance schedule where each day is a different machine's maintenance that they do the weekly maintenance on. And so that one machine out of 5 might be down for an hour or two because they like go deep into this thing. But the great thing is they're still pumping out shirts out of the 4 others for that hour to 2 hours that they're diving into this thing.
Yep.
So I highly recommend that. I've also seen a lot of people moving away from like the large cornets. They'll move into getting a lot of these style machines, or a bunch of brothers and things like that nature, just for that factor. That's my big feedback is if you're doing fulfillment for Shopify stores, if you want to be that POD store, that print on demand option, I really, really recommend getting a multi-machine setup, whichever one you're looking at, and ask the person you're talking with if they've done that, if they've set those up, what things you need to look at. For instance, if you're doing Shopify, there are custom options where you can actually have the have a bolt-on added onto your RIP, or a middleware software that will take the orders from Shopify and send it to the right queue of your RIP. Like, that's something that you need to talk about, and maybe you don't put it in place right out of the gate, but you eventually will. So to answer the question quickly, multi-machine over single machine with 2 pallets right now across the board. And then the second thing is just ask some more questions on the advanced RIP aspect and how it can connect to something like Shopify when you're ready to do so, if you're wanting to be that type of printer. So that was a great question. What's another one, man?
Excuse me. So we have, I'm gonna paraphrase this one a little bit. We're a small shop. We work with small number of orders from 6 shirts to 100 shirts with 5 different color schemes or more. Screen printing has not been a cost-effective option, so we're considering DTG. Would this be a good option for a small shop?
Yes. So I definitely recommend DTG for a small shop like that. Typically what you care about is I ask people about what's your average order size and color quantity. Because basically at the end of the day, what happens is time is the most important and most costly part of any business, especially in apparel decorating, right? Because we're a production style industry. So what happens with screen printing, the bigger the quantity and lower the color count, the more money you're going to make because you're spending less time per shirt on that, right? Where digital really comes into play is those lower those lower quantity of shirts and higher color counts of shirts. So a lot of shops, for instance, that have screen printing will say, okay, if it's 24 pieces or below and it's 2 colors or more, I'm going to DTG it because I can print that job before I have the screens cleaned, coated with emulsion, burned, films printed, and separations done, and it's on the press and I've lined it up. If you can do the job on a DTG before all of that, do it. DTG will not, this is like, throw this out on record, record this part if you want to, DTG will not be replacing screen printing white on a black shirt right now. For the forthcoming future as well, like someone comes in your shop and says, hey man, I want 75 shirts for my band next week. We're playing a big show. I need a Toltex as cheap as you can get it, white ink on a black shirt. If you put that 75 piece order on a DTG, especially a single DTG, you can do it. I just highly do not recommend it because of the time. Throw it on a screen printing press, call your screen printing buddy, outsource it because it's still a big thing. Now, the problem that this person is probably going to come into is depending on what the average quantity of order is. If you're averaging, it sounds like they're averaging like 5 colors per design or per print. Depending on the quantity of that, when you start getting like above the 4850 mark, and you're doing that on one DTG, that can kind of start to have an issue. So what most likely I would recommend is, if budget persists, I would recommend getting 2 digital machines. If not, let's put together a plan where you start with 1 and you ramp up as you go. Okay. The other thing, as a quick note that will come up when people ask me how can I go faster, a lot of times a big bottleneck is the curing process and the pre-treatment curing process. So a quick way to go faster is to get a second heat press and then definitely upgrade into a dryer that fits in your shop that can do digital curing. But a second heat press is a super, super helpful thing with that. Mike, you guys actually, like with the high color count and stuff like that, that was one of the reasons why you got into it for Snarky, right?
Yeah. That question, Sebastian, that was kind of how what a boat we were kind of sitting in. And that's what we first started using. It was, well, a lot of our stuff was 4 or 5, 5 color stuff. And we have, and that I agree with you on that bottleneck issue you're talking about. Well, we run out through a conveyor. I've got 2 heat presses right now. When I'm jamming, when I'm printing on that PolyPrint, I'm always waiting on my PolyPrint. So meaning, when I gear up and hive another one, I still am probably with my 2 presses and my dryer, I could probably keep up with 2. So I'm ahead of the game, when I think about that curing process, that bottleneck so far. But yeah.
Cool. Yeah, what's another one? These are great questions. Fire out some more, man.
Does the PolyPrint RIP have the option to import from Shopify in Etsy?
So does the PolyPrint RIP, which is CAD link, have the option to import from Shopify and Etsy? The short answer is yes. The longer answer is there's multiple ways of doing it. So the CAD link as a whole, their digital factory has what's called hot folders. Hot folders are basically folders that you put on your computer, a server, or you even assign them to an email. And basically what happens is the art can get sent to that email or downloaded into that hot folder, and it will put it into the correct rip. Now, the longer answer though is, how do you make that happen? That's where like a middleware software will really come into play. It's funny this question's coming up because I was on the phone with PolyPrint this morning. We're working with a software development company to make an easier, faster way of doing that, specifically with Shopify. The problem, so Shopify actually isn't that hard to do it. And there's even some manual ways you could do it if you wanted to pay someone some money, they could set you up something. The problem with Etsy, however, because my wife and I ran an Etsy business for a long time, and we were printing tons of stuff out of it. The way that you export orders from Etsy specifically, and the information you can grab from that is really tough to make that automated. It can be done, but it needs to be very specific. So the short answer to your question is, can it be done with the rip that's included? Yes. The longer question that you would want to talk to someone about is how exactly you want that to happen, because you will most likely want to get into some sort of a middleware software that sends that info around. And most likely, what I would recommend too is you set up a barcode system with that as well, where basically per order there's a barcode that gets generated and added onto there. And with CAD-Link, you just scan that barcode and it'll search for the specific image that's assigned to that barcode and the specific queue that's assigned to that barcode, and it will take that image, put it into the queue, and then go into that. So that's a really big deep dive conversation. Like I said, feel free, shoot me an email, luke@ryonet.com. If you have questions about that, a little more specific, we'd be happy to do that. Also reach out to us on social too. We can go into that as well. Sebastian, we got any more questions right now?
Not necessarily, but I would talk about the difference between a print driver versus like a rip software.
That's a really good question. Yes. So a print driver is basically just when you print. There's some DTGs that their included rip is just a driver. All right. And so basically what that means is, let's say that you buy your desktop paper printer, right? And you go to install that HP printer onto your computer. It downloads and installs drivers. So from any software like Word, Illustrator, Corel, Photoshop, PDF, Preview, anything, when you click print, it's sending that info through the driver. So that's just something that's on the computer, versus a rip is a dedicated program that can be customized and really dialed in to specifically what you need depending on the art and the garment, okay? So basically a driver, and the ones that we're talking about that are included with some of these printers will get the job done. They actually print good stuff, but most people will get into a more premium rip, and I highly recommend that. So like a lot of people who get a Brother GTX, which is a great machine, it prints really fast and has pretty good looking prints on it. But most people that I work with that get into one of those machines, their first purchase afterwards is a rip. They'll get the CAD-Link version or the Cathari version, stuff like that. So yeah, definitely recommend a rip, and that kind of those aspects will be answered when you ask that question about what's the rip that's included, and you want to see a demo of it or a video. So yeah, basically, again, short answer is the rip is a dedicated software that tells the machine what to do based on the art and the garment it's going on and settings that you've created, whereas a driver is just going to tell the machine to print based on some very small information. So Mike, do you have any other questions that you would put out there that people should ask, or anything like that? And then Sebastian, you ring in anything else that comes up too. We probably should start wrapping up here shortly. We're a little over time. We started a little late, so that's perfect.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mike.
I think I think that the pre-treat and just having, for us, it was smarter when the need for the DTG machine versus looking for the need for DTG machine. So I think that, yeah, you've covered everything. That was really interesting. On one question I had for you, Luke, was when you're talking about Shopify and the RIP and the barcodes and the queues, will it actually will my RIP actually send it to as far as the last time it was ripped, as far as the settings for that queue, i.e. my white density, or if I'm putting a little more chroma into it, will it grab those settings also?
So it grabs the settings that are currently set for the queue itself. So if you
makes sense.
Yeah, and so it'll automatically have that, and then it'll just kind of go from there.
Right.
There's also options coming with that specific rip that we're working on, to where when it rips, it'll create a file that you just save. And moving forward, what you could do at that point is, instead of that file getting pulled into a queue, it just pulls up that file, and it sends it automatically, because all the info is saved in the file. Just so people know too, real quick. We're talking a lot about a rip, which I really love, because people don't talk enough about it. But what you need to know is a rip is basically set up in queues. Okay, a queue is in a sense a template of settings that, based on the color of shirt you're printing and based on the size of your shirt that you're printing, it's going to manipulate the art to do that automatically. And what's neat is, like with CADLink and some of these other software, instead of you, with screen printing, for instance, if I have a design and I'm going to make a left chest print of that design, and I'm also going to do a full front, and I'm also going to do a center chest, and I'm also going to do a back yoke, and I'm also going to do a sleeve print of that design, typically I will want to save those individually, or I'll have like a raw file that has all of them with registration marks on it saved. So my art management, it's very big, right? When you get into these rips, you customize them and can tweak them to where you have one file, and that one file will be altered depending on the queue it's dropped into. So maybe I'm looking at the black queues or black shirts. So I have a queue set for black shirts, and I've got this one set for left chest. So when I drag that piece of artwork in, it will resize and put it to where it's supposed to go for my left chest. And then I can take that same piece of art and pull it into the queue that's for youth apparel, and it'll resize it and put it where it's supposed to go for the youth. So it speeds up the automation of your day, even when you're technically not automating it because you're manually dragging it in there. Just that aspect is really nice, and kind of something that I consider this, in a sense, like a layer 2 type of thing, where someone comes in, they learn the machine, they're getting into the rip. One of the next steps that I talk about is, like, let's tweak this to where your guys are easily just dragging and dropping stuff into the rip, and it's taking care of it. When we talk about fulfillment, for instance, that was one of the things that I liked a lot about this rip. When my wife and I were running one of our companies, we had, I think it was 19 queues set up, and they were all based on, it was a lot. It was probably way too much, but it was all based on the garment size and color of the garment. And so in the mornings, she would just take this one file of art and just put it in the different folders that it was supposed to go to, so that when the person running the machine would come in, she would just hit the go button and be good to go. Like they were set up. Nothing, they're not resizing it, they're not doing anything. So it takes that human error, which will happen every once in a while, no matter what, kind of out of the picture, which is super nice. So yeah, that's very helpful. And yeah, so you can do a lot of things with some of these rips. They're very, very deep dive in detail. Sebastian, anything else from you, man?
Sebastian?
There he is.
Nope, we're good.
All right, cool. Well, so we're gonna go ahead and wrap this up. Everyone that's on here will get an email with a copy of this, or a link to view this recording. And feel free though too to reach out to Ryonet through screenprinting.com, our Facebook channel, our Instagram, like any of our social. Please feel free to reach out. We've got people on there all the time. You can send an email to me if you want to, Luke@ryonet.com. and I'd be happy to answer any specific questions. Make sure, look up Snarky Cancer on Instagram, follow them. They're really cool. Sebastian's a pretty cool dude too.
Right.
There we go.
Sebastian's a good
So,
dude.
Sebastian's a good guy. He knows a lot about DTG and screen printing in general, period. So feel free to reach out. Again, if you have any questions, we're here to help. Thanks for hanging out with us. We're also going to send you the quick kind of summary of what we covered on those 6 questions. So you'll get that as well. But again, please, we're here to help you reach out whenever, however you can. And y'all have a great rest of your day. Mike, thanks again so much, man. You were
Thank you, Luke.
super helpful.
Thanks, man.
Thanks,
See you,
y'all.
Sebastian.
Yeah.